Good evening, or maybe it isn't for you, for I don't know where in time or in space you are engaging with us. But if it is around 6:30 p.m. British Summer Time on the 5th of September 2021, it will be great if you can join us in our Zoom discussion, which will follow the end of this service, to further explore our theme, which is space exploration and Christian faith. And we'll set our reflection in the context of the worship of God who made all things through this hymn, Lord of the Boundless Curves of Space. Space exploration has been prominent in the news of late. In July, we had the culmination of the race to accomplish the first successful commercial spaceflight. The jury is out as to who won. Richard Branson's Unity plane rose to 85 kilometers, which in American terms is into space, which they say starts at 80 kilometers. But a few days later, Jeff Bezos's New Shepard rocket capsule was the first to ascend beyond the so-called Kármán line at 100 kilometers, which the rest of the world defines as the edge of space. The third entrepreneur currently developing spaceflight commercially, Elon Musk, has the more ambitious aim of a rocket that can travel to the moon perhaps as early as the mid-2020s. He has already hired his services to NASA, taking astronauts to the International Space Station. Bezos and Branson are currently only able to offer suborbital flight. Their vehicles cannot escape gravity, so flights are brief as long as fuel lasts. But apart from these developments, much more has been taking place in space lately. Earlier this year, NASA's Perseverance rover, after a flight of 6.5 months, successfully landed on Mars. Among its many explorations, Martian rock is now being collected and should be returned to the Earth in 10 years' time. Later this year, NASA expects to launch DART, a mission to crash a spacecraft into an asteroid to attempt to change its direction in the hope that the method could one day prevent a catastrophic asteroid collision with Earth. In November, the Webb Space Telescope is due for launch, successor to the Hubble, with 15 times the field of view and better resolution. Around the same time, NASA will launch Artemis 1, the first of a series that is expected to return men and for the first time take women to the moon by 2024. And China and the UAE have also reached Mars this year, China with a rover on its surface. Japan, India, and other nations are getting seriously involved in space exploration now, as well as the USA and Russia, not to mention the more modest contributions of the European and UK space agencies. What is driving this eagerness to expand into space? And how do we feel about it as people of religious faith? Those are the questions to explore this evening, which is why I hope you might join in the discussion to follow. It may well be true to say that human nature always wants to try to do whatever it seems might be done. Hence George Mallory's famous answer to the question, why climb Everest? Because it's there. Nevertheless, the timing and the expense of the original space race of the late 1950s and 1960s was a matter of politics. In the Cold War era, the Soviet Union and the United States believed that cultural victories in science or sport would demonstrate to the nations under their influence the superiority of their ideology. Now, for the benefit of those of you for whom this is history rather than recollection, in that race, the Russians launched the first satellite and then enabled the first animal, a dog, to orbit the Earth in 1957, followed by the first human, Yuri Gagarin, in 1961. But it was the Americans who reached the moon first, landing on the 20th of July 1969. Having had my 18th birthday the day before, I'd more or less given up my teenage hobby of stamp collecting, but my remaining collection includes a postcard postmarked Cape Canaveral on the day of the launch. One of the interesting things about the early space program is the way faith, or its lack, became part of the dynamic of the superpowers strutting their stuff. In an attempt at fake news, it was widely suggested that Gagarin had remarked, "I went all that way and didn't see God." But in fact, Gagarin was an Orthodox Christian, and it was Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, attempting to score points for atheistic communism, who initiated that soundbite. Meanwhile, white Protestant male Christians dominated the early American space program. Buzz Aldrin had discussed with his Presbyterian pastor how he might appropriately mark the first human steps on the moon. And he ended up privately taking Holy Communion during the 4-hour radio blackout for rest time following the landing and before Neil Armstrong took his giant leap for mankind. On Christmas Eve the previous year, orbiting the moon, the Apollo 8 crew, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and William Anders, took turns reading from Genesis 1 for the world to hear. Unlike in Britain, in the USA, church and state are separated. Yet duty to God has been tacitly understood to justify all exertion of American supremacy over others, from every push west across the continent into Native American lands, to every war fought up to the present day. But as Earth politics shifted, the first space race ended in 1975 when American and Russian craft linked in space as part of the first international mission. And since 2000, the International Space Station has continually been home to a community of nations. Nowadays, the search for life on other worlds is a significant part of the goal of space exploration. The Mars explorations are seeking direct evidence of fossil life, as well as determining the suitability of the environment for future human exploration and even colonization. The potential of space as a tourist destination is clearly also a driver for the commercial programs. Some 600 people have paid deposits on Virgin Galactic tickets costing £250,000 each, just to see the sky turn black in the day, marvel at Earth's curving horizon, and experience 5 minutes of weightlessness before dropping back to Earth. Those individuals, not all of them super rich by any means, are motivated mainly by wanderlust, by the spirit of adventure. But some may be seeking more. In 1987, Frank White named the quasi-religious feeling of seeing the Earth from space, which many on the International Space Station experience, the overview effect. Some developers are hoping to bring that spiritual experience to the masses by way of virtual reality, using cameras mounted in CubeSats, miniature satellites in orbit. Now, some Christians are inclined to reject space exploration absolutely as a justifiable project. Most commonly, the waste of money argument is invoked. With so many people on Earth hungry, uneducated, lacking in basic health care, that should always take precedence in spending, they say. Though, on the other hand, when it comes to human well-being, space research creates many jobs and economic stimulation. It's led to many discoveries and inventions that significantly contribute to the improvement of life on Earth. In healthcare, CAT scanners and laser eye surgery techniques, for example. And then such wide-ranging benefits as home water filters, making dirty water safe around the world, aviation safety systems, satellite contributions to weather prediction, which enable significant improvements to harvests by foretelling the best time, and the early warning of hurricanes, enabling evacuation in time to save lives. Christians of a fundamentalist persuasion sometimes have a knee-jerk reaction to almost all scientific undertaking, denying on principle widely accepted science regarding, say, evolution or climate change. It would be too simple to say it is merely an uncritical belief in the conflict model for the relationship of science and faith, but that may be the largest contributor to that stance. Others in that stream of church are so sure that Christ's second coming will be very soon that long-term scientific goals are a waste of time. A bit like Paul arguing in Corinthians, there's no point getting married if you can live without sex, since time is so short. Or then again, they may feel that the Bible's witness makes extraterrestrial life impossible, so why waste time looking for it? Or perhaps some are fearful that what might be discovered will undermine that axiomatic belief. I mention these viewpoints because even if we don't hold them, we need to take them into account if seeking a comprehensive Christian view of space. The alternative, more positive approach of Christian or Jewish faith to space exploration might begin with the recognition that since much of our understanding of the Bible is rooted in the landscape and ecology of the Holy Land, we then have to move beyond that to relate the Bible's faith more comprehensively to human life in all times and places, and so develop a fuller understanding of God. And therefore, there's every possibility that living off the earth entirely would broaden our perspective and our theology yet further. As an environmentalist, I do think that the pictures of Earth from space and from the moon, starting with that iconic picture entitled Earthrise that Bill Anders shot on Christmas Eve 1968, may have been what seriously launched the environmental movement. The beauty and fragility of our planet are encapsulated in that image and many that followed. Jeff Bezos, regarding his recent mission in which he deliberately took with him the oldest and youngest persons to travel into space to date, said, "We need to take all heavy industry, all polluting industry, and move it into space and keep Earth as this beautiful gem of a planet that it is." He went on to say that it would take decades and decades, but that his suborbital tourism was the start of practice for such a goal. Well, exporting polluting industries may not sit easily with our conscience, but it's interesting how the beauty of Earth, when viewed from space and relative to the other planets of our solar system, has inspired that desire to protect it. For those who do have faith in God and who are involved in space exploration, they pursue their goals, like so many of those who made great scientific advances in earlier times, as an act of worship. Such people study to know God better. They are pointed in that direction by Romans 1:20. Ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things God has made. Space exploration shifts our gaze from the temporal to the transcendent. 80 years ago, before we had travelled to space, C.S. Lewis in his Space Trilogy wrote, "Be confident, small immortals, you are not the only voice that all things utter, nor is there eternal silence in the places where you cannot come." Now, Lewis is a thinker and storyteller whom Christians across the theological spectrum greatly respect, clearly believing there is more to God's amazing creation than what happens on this one small planet. That seems to me to be of a piece with the psalmist of Psalm 19, who begins, "The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork." To my mind, it's logical that if God created life here, by whatever means, he's likely to have done the same elsewhere within his creation. Geocentrism, in the astrophysical sense, was abandoned centuries ago, though only after sustained protests from part of the church. God did not place this planet, nor this solar system, nor this galaxy at the physical center of the universe. So I think it is a reasonable question to ask why we should think that biologically all life is focused here. Particularly now we know that there are plenty of other galaxies and solar systems that are highly likely to have planets similar to ours. In recent decades, we've been seriously learning that humans are not the only creatures that matter on our planet, and that living as though we are, taking actions that destroy the rest, will prove the death of us as well. Which brings us to that other biblical basis for responsible engagement with the universe beyond Earth, Genesis 1:26, often called the cultural mandate or creation mandate. Let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over, and there's a list to accompany every living thing. If we interpret have dominion correctly and in line with the way chapter 2 portrays the responsibility to care for creation, then enjoyment, applying creativity to, seeing God's glory reflected in, are proper descriptions of how we should engage with all that God has made. Our long overdue awakening to our need as a post-industrial race to seriously respect our earthly ecosystem, as earlier generations did, must surely lead us to taking equal responsibility towards what lies beyond the common line. Society is asking questions already, from issues as local as concern about the vast amount of waste junk we have left in Earth orbit, to that of whether the Moon and Mars should be designated like Antarctica as locations for research only, with human bases in a defined perimeter and the rest declared a kind of global national park, to the questions of whether we should anticipate interplanetary migration, and that of what kind of relationship we would seek with life when discovered elsewhere. People of faith need to join the discussion. I invite you to do that. But before we have such opportunity, we end this part of the evening with a hymn that forms a prayer for the journey onward. God, who stretched the spangled heavens.